on. Turn around. Like this. And I'm going to say ready. And you've got to bring it up like this. Aim and fire. Okay. Now, these are pretty long barrels, aren't they? You ever see anything that long? Even though during the Revolutionary War they had guns that were 46-inch barrels. Two reasons for the barrels. The longer the barrel, the more accurate it was. Makes sense, doesn't it? And the other one is because of your ears. Because the way they used to fire, he's the front rank. Okay? And I'm the rear rank. And I bring the gun over and I put the middle of the gun right here so that when I fire it, his ear won't get blasted with the noise. Okay, so we're going to do this. Group parade rest. Ready? Aim. Fire. Bang! And that's the way it went.
That's awesome. You're recruited.
Both of these original guns, I converted them back to flint myself. This one is 1825. It's almost 200 years old. It works. It was made in Harper's Ferry, Virginia. And this one is 1830 that was made in Springfield. And in 1795, George Washington set up 2 armories in the U.S. A lot of people don't know that. One was Harper's Ferry. Have you ever been to Harper's Ferry? Cool place. That's where Robert E. Lee captured John Brown in 1858. So he set up the 2 armories, and each one of them made, believe it or not, 350,000 muskets. That's almost 700,000 muskets like this. And at the time of the Civil War, 98% of them were converted back to percussion. And I can talk about that later, but it's fired with a cap instead of a can and a net, so it was more reliable. Another interesting fact is from 1817 until 1859 is 17 years. Until Afghanistan, the Seminole Wars were by far the longest war that we've ever been in, and that was only surpassed about 3 years ago. The trousers are the same color as equal. Men didn't wear pants. Women wore pants and panties. Okay? Men didn't wear shirts. They wore blouses. This is a blouse. Okay? And this is called a tunic. The tunic, you had to have at least the top button buttoned at all times, or you could be court-martialed because you could get sick and die. The swamps had gases, miasmas that were coming up, and they would grab you by the throat and you would die from fever. But if you kept that top button, you were going to be okay. So by the end of this period in 1842, the U.S. government wanted, well, the generals wanted to make a peace treaty with the Seminoles. And the government said no. And you know what the guy's name was? Poinsett. And the poinsettia flower he discovered, and it was named after him. So he was a flower child. So the war went on again. And then in 1859, which was an outbreak with Billy Bowlegs, he raided somebody's point. So the U.S. troops came in, and there was only maybe 300 Seminoles left, and they took about 100 of those and sent them west. So 200 survived under Sam Jones. Maybe people know about Sam Jones. And they rebuilt. Seminole tribe of Florida today has maybe 3,000, but in Oklahoma, like 80,000. But that's where they're all sent. You went to Oklahoma. You went. These are booties. This is what you would have worn in the Civil War, and actually the War of 1812, all way back. And there's horseshoes on them. to keep them from wearing down. And you can't see it, but the soles are not sewn. They have wooden pegs. So the wooden pegs would swell up and keep the things from coming apart. Well, the gun with the bayonet and then with a pouch full of lead, that's probably about 18 pounds. And this is handmade. This is period correct. And, depends on what you had in.
Right.
But that would probably weigh 10 pounds full. The shoes are fairly heavy too. Let's say you were a volunteer. There was a lot of volunteers, and they would have worn these kind of trousers. Maybe they weren't sky blue, but they would be broad fall, just like these are. No zippers, no buttons in front. And he probably would have worn, this is very common. It's a round crown hat. He would have worn this. Any hat that's flat on the top, like a Stetson or cowboy hat, is not period correct. They were all like this. And then a lot of them had straw hats. Now, if you're a sailor, you'd have a straw hat, and you would tar it to be black. A jack tar is what? What's a jack tar? A sailor? Because of the tar in the decks. Anyway. So he would have had that. Probably would have had one of these. And I'm talking about Lieutenant Powell on the Loxahatchee. He was U.S. Navy. This particular pistol is Napoleonic. It was made in 1850. And it's interesting, there's no ramrod because you only loaded it once. You put it over your shoulder and then you hung about 5 or 6 of these because you were a boarding party. The grapnels went over to the ship, they pulled them close, and then you would jump onto the ship with your sword and you would fire all these. When they were empty, you turn around and beat somebody in the head with it. So that's an interesting piece. This is your powder horn. You fill that up. This is an 1830 Hawken. Built it myself, but it's pretty standard about what they would have. There's rifling. Does anybody know what rifling means or why they do it? Come on, speak up.
Grooves in the barrel to make the
Makes it
ball
go fat,
spin.
like throwing a football. If you look in the end of this, you'll see it spiral. The problem with that is it takes a long time. I shoot this on the weekends. You got to ram it home, put the powder in first, then put the ball in. Put powder in the can. If you look close, you'll see it spark. And it would go on. You could shoot about 7 or 8 times, and then you got to clean it because it won't fire anymore. So you got to run wet patches down, clean it, and then load it. Now, the musket, you clean it every 300 shots. So would you rather have 300 shots in the Army? Or maybe 50? So that was a big advantage to that. These guns came to the Seminoles through Providence. It's called Nassau now. And from Cuba. It was gun runners. They were bringing them in. There was one rifle that was captured after the Battle of Gettysburg, and it was loaded 29 times because the guy freaked out. He didn't know it was loaded, so he loaded again and again and again and again. And then after the battle, the kids would go around, put powder and shoot the ramrods in the air. So there's instances of people getting shot with ramrods. Now the other thing about a rifle in the Seminoles is they would take these lead balls and put them in their mouth. Is that a good thing?
No.
They put the powder in and then spit the ball down. Now, if the ball doesn't land on the powder and you shoot it, you don't happen to the gun, it blows up. But they didn't measure anything. So there's instances of a guy being shot and the bullet coming, hitting his forehead and bouncing off. This would have been a typical long shirt he was worn during the Seminole War. These are good colors. The important thing is to not do bad colors, okay? And I can help you with that. But it's got a yoke in it. It's all ruffled. And this was good from the 1830s to about the 1870s or 80s. And then they started making it this way, with just stripes. And again, you see calico, spots. This one has oyster bites. I made this when I was 16 years old. And I used to dance it to do quarter the euro like this. And of course, everybody's familiar with this. This is what you see today. Now, I made a jacket with 4 bands, which is the best. This has 2 bands. Can you see them? 2 bands? Can you see it? 2 bands? 2 bands?
Unbelievable.
Okay, and I made one that had 4 in it, so that's more valuable. And I actually copied the shirt that was worn by Billy Bowlegs III. And when I was 16 years old, I met him at an Order the Arrow camp. So I remade his jacket when I was going to FSU, of course, and my daughter has it. But this type of work you didn't see until the 1920s. Okay, so when you start doing your Seminole costume, if you don't want to do this kind of stuff, it's not right. Okay? The number one thing to remember is don't put that patchwork stuff on it, modern stuff. And number 2 is to pick the right colors. These are some of the colors. They like what they call pigeon red. Okay, and you can see this has some examples, all the different colors. This is some artwork that I did. I made the loop and I made these. This is called a plank loop. It was used by the Dutch. It's real easy to do. You just take a 6-foot long board and you put finishing nails every 1/4 of an inch on both sides. And I did that. And I also made these garters, okay? And they were one to keep your leggings on. The Seminoles had a pouch for their balls and stuff like that, and it was triangular, okay? It wasn't like a powder ball. And this would be holding that up. This would go around the waist. This would be garters around the legs. Okay? I even made the loom for it. This is the frizzen. That's called the battery or the frizzen. And it's made out of hardened steel. This is called the cock, okay, or the hammer. And then in that cock is a flint. See, you all see that, the flint? The flint is hand napped at a certain angle, and if you get the right kind, believe it or not, every time you fire it, it sharpens it. Okay. So you fill this pan up with powder, you close it, and then you put the rest of the gunpowder in the gun, and you put the ball on top of it. And when you fire, it fires. Now these parts here that I was talking about. You're a re-enactor, you're required to have one of these. And that goes on the frizzen, and you can't fire the gun because the flint's going to hit the leather. So that's required. So I sell these for rifles. The touch hole communicates the fire between the pan into the barrel. There's a hole there. So on your little kit here, you have a pick. And you go in the hole, and you wiggle it in and out to clean it. Now, if this gets real dirty and there's a lot of gunpowder, this is a horsehair brush. I keep these on there just, when I'm storing them, so you clean that out. It also has a screwdriver to go in here to tighten your flint. And the last thing, which is kind of interesting, is this little hammer. What do you think the hammer's for?
Napping the flint.
Right, napping the flint. So what you do is, if you get a misfire, you just come here. This is brass. You're supposed to plug the hole with a toothpick or something, so it won't accidentally misfire. But the double thing is it's brass, and you just hit it, click, 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 and that sharpens it. And you have this on your person at all times. This one, the bead colors are from a Cherokee. They like the blues and the pinks. And this is done with a deer antler. A lot of work, cutting, polishing. And it has what they call a crown burr on the end. And this blade is Obsidian. Anybody ever heard of Obsidian? It's a black rock that comes from the volcanoes. And it's very easily napped into sharp shape. And that's what these are made of. This is pre-Columbian. This was the knife. And this is actually Obsidian right here. You got to be careful. If you drop it, it'll break, because it's not flint. It's Obsidian. So all of the skins are deer hide. 2 of them are brain tan. Anybody here brain tan? Every animal has a brain, right? Every deer, goat, they have a brain. And what the Indians did was they'd take that brain and they'd mash it up. They would take the hide, put it in a stream, and leave it there. And then put some of this on the hide to get the hair off, both sides. And then they would hang it over a beam, and they would scrape it to make it soft. But they'd go back and forth with a rope. And that's called brain tan. And it's beautiful. Anybody got a sweeping hand on their clock? Okay. Tell me when to start.
No.
Huh? No. No. Okay, so I reach over here, I take my cartridge out, I bite it off, I put a little bit in the pan, and I close it. Then I take the ball that's part of it, and I put the powder in there. I ram that. Now, because in battle, I would just stick that. Bam, time. Anybody guess what this might be?
Powder measure.
It's a powder measure. 60 grains of black powder. That's it. You're dismissed.